gonna be like
30 seconds. So okay.
Gotta let it go.
Good. Probably good.
I call to order the meeting of the mayor and council. I want to thank everybody for being here. If you'll rise for the invocation by Councilman McCoy.
If you would please bow your heads. Dear Lord, thank you for this opportunity to gather in your name. Lord, please watch over us. Lord, please provide us your guidance and your will to make the best decisions we can for our city and our constituents. Lord, continue to watch over this world, our nation, and keep us all safe and make your grace. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
Amen. Please remain standing for the pledge. Pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Be seated. Okay, do we have any changes to tonight's agenda?
No, sir, we do not.
Okay, you've all received the minutes from our last meeting. If there are no questions or comments, I'll accept the motion to receive the minutes.
Mr. Mayor, Councilman Orlando Holland, I make that motion.
Okay, we have a motion. Do we have a second?
Councilman McCoy, I'll second it.
Okay, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Okay, it's unanimous. Okay, do we have any correspondence?
No, sir, we do not.
Okay, we're being asked to speak into the mic, and since I'm the only one speaking, it must be me that's not doing it correctly, so. Okay, we have a public hearing tonight at 7:05, so in respect of our time, we're going to go ahead and jump down to reminder of meetings.
Okay, thank you, Mayor. Tricia Newcomer, Director of Economic Development and Community Relations, will be acting city manager from March 27th through April 4th, 2021. We'll have extended office hours here at City Hall on Wednesday, March 24th from 5 to 7 p.m. for voter registration. And then again, we'll have extended office hours Saturday, April 10th from 10 to 1 for absentee voting. And as everyone is aware, we do have a municipal election coming up on April 17th, 2021. And the candidates are as follows. Mr. Jeff Benson has filed for City Council. Councilman Orlando Holland has filed for re-election, as well as Councilman James King. And Mr. Scott Peckinpah has filed for City Council. I don't have any more, sir.
Okay, thank you very much. And again, in respect of time, we're going to move around our agenda. We're going to do committee reports. I've asked Councilman Santos to do his on administration and IT.
Thank you, Mayor Genshaw. My report has been submitted in its entirety. I'm going to talk about a few points here. Charles attended the quarterly meeting with the golf course consultant. During our liaison meeting, we discussed, a few things that we could, a few ways that we could try to lower the cost for city residents. He's going to be looking into that for us. He also attended the monthly code and construction coordination meeting. He made some inspections on the Oyster House project. For the IT report, they are, they've been busy, but, they're working on the fiber documentation and cleanup. They need to do discovery and fix connections going through King Street and Arch Street. For the administration report, they're working on the fiscal year 2022 budget. They said they should be wrapping things up this week. Mm-hmm. And they are still in negotiation with the police department Teamsters, and they have a meeting tomorrow, March 24th. That concludes my report, Mayor Genshaw.
Okay, thank you very much. Appreciate you going out of turn like that. All right, we're going to go ahead and close our regular meeting and open up the public hearing. I'll call up our building official, Mr. Bailey, to lead us through.
Thank you. Good evening, everybody.
Good evening.
So the first item on the public hearing is for Opportunity Street LLC. They're seeking a preliminary site plan review for approval of a parking lot expansion, new parking area, additional utility expansion, lighting, landscaping, and stormwater maintenance in support of the WDE1 project for 1700 Delaney Street, tax map and parcel 531-12.00, 45.03, and 200 Allen Drive, that's tax map and parcel 531-12.00-48.00. We do have Brock Parker, Will Kernodle, and I believe Brad Gillis is here from the project as well. So the big news yesterday, this is Amazon. So they did supply this photo from the press release. So that's the building in question, formerly housed Kenco Transportation Services. So they have proposed a site plan for it. So these are the two sites there. The in red is 1700 Delaney Street, and the blue one is 200 Allen Street. They both front on Delaney Street. It's just the entrance for the one on Allen Street for the old Southern States there. This is the site plan we received, showing a large parking lot and stormwater improvements on both sites. So on 1700 Delaney Street, they're proposing 153 parking spaces. They're going to add a canopy to that building for covered loading and charging area for their vehicles, and stormwater improvements on that site. And on the 200 Allen Street property, they are doing 535 paved parking spaces, and the stormwater improvements on there include 2 ponds. They will need approvals from the State Fire Marshal, which I believe they have, and they're working on the approval from the city engineer and Sussex Conservation for the stormwater. This is just an enlarged image of the 1700 Delaney, showing the parking area. It's kind of hard to see because it's the same color, but the canopy there is kind of in the middle, just off the side of the building. And they are connecting this building to the city water and sewer, which it currently does. It does have water connection, but not sewer. So they're doing a new water connection, a new sewer connection for that building. And there's an existing gravel road on the east side of the property. They're going to relocate it back into the right of way. I guess over the years it's just kind of worked its way onto this site, so they're moving it out of the property back onto the right of way. This is the 200 Allen Street property. It's all parking, other than 2 stormwater ponds that handle the stormwater off of both properties. And there's 535 spaces. And then unique to this site is its vicinity to our well on Delaney Street and water tower. And we do have a wellhead safe zone in our zoning ordinance, and the language is up there that we require a 100-foot safe zone around that well, and council can make approvals for structures in that area. So their pond and some of the parking lot falls within this area, so it'll be on the findings of facts for approval on that occupation of that 100-foot safe zone. If there's any questions?
Okay, are there any questions from council?
I have a question.
Councilman Henderson?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So let me try to understand this. Are you asking us to approve the wellhead safety zone tonight as well, or is that in a future?
If you don't mind, I'll ask. What's been laid out there, and if you wouldn't mind, Mike, going back to the drawing, you can't really see it here, Mike. If you would mind, could you just trace it out?
Yeah.
And what this is, because of the fact that there is a domestic production well there, this area falls within our wellhead protection zone. So part of this project they have to look at a climactic water budget and do groundwater recharge, which they're working with our city engineer on. But one interesting fact of our wellhead protection ordinance is we require a 100-foot safe zone diameter around the wellhead. But as part of our wellhead protection ordinance, council can look at that for existing conditions and make an exception to that or approve what's laid out. So that's why Mike is pointing it out to you as part of our ordinance. Doesn't need a variance, doesn't need a special exception. In essence, making council aware that this is occurring, and you have the authority as the city council sitting as this body to approve that if you agree with the way the engineers laid it out.
And this pond, they're working with our engineer, will probably be a lined pond too, so it won't infiltrate.
That's my major thing,
Right.
that they're going to use best practices or beyond to protect the city's well.
Yeah, and they said all the water that goes in this pond is from that parking lot, the very thin parking lot at the top. Very little from the big parking lot goes into this one. That all goes into the big pond on the other side of the site. But this one will be a lined pond. They're working with GMB on that.
But will, like on the final site review, be able to see more detail?
Yes, sir. Yeah, and again, they'll flesh out their details, and Mike was talking about whether the ponds will be lined, the clean stormwater from the not-so-clean stormwater. So, yeah, they'll be able to provide you additional information upon final plan approval.
Okay, any other,
Satisfies me, thank you.
you're welcome. Any other questions from council? Are there any questions from the public? If you'll come up to the mic, state your name, please, for the record.
Yes, good evening, council. I'm Toby French. I'm the chairperson for Seaford Tomorrow. I was just wondering, I didn't hear anything about traffic. Is there any plans? Obviously, this is a fantastic thing for Seaford, for the city of Seaford, and it'd be a big economic boost, so that's great, good jobs. I just wondered about the traffic of, you know, if there's not some work with DelDOT, I think Stein Highway is DelDOT's, right? So if there's not some work with them, you know, if you get heavy traffic on Stein Highway, the employees could be backed up for a long time waiting to get off the property. So I just wondered.
Yeah, I mean, maybe try to answer that. Mike, could you go back to the overall site plan? So you are correct, Delaney Street ties into Stein Highway, but the entrances that are being requested here are onto Delaney Street. So that's a city-maintained street, so this project will not require approval of DelDOT. So we have authority over that. When we did our internal review, we worked with the engineer to put in stop signs, traffic, and Brock Parker's here. Maybe you could help me. Brock's the engineer with that developed the site plans. But we worked with them to put up stop signs so we could control traffic internally as well as onto Delaney Street. Does that answer your question, Mr. French?
Any other questions from the public? I will ask a question. Does DelDOT at some point get involved with all this traffic dumping out onto Stein Highway?
A couple things I'll say is that if the zoning were to change, DelDOT might take a look at that. If there was a huge traffic concern that got created out on their street, DelDOT might take a look at it. But typically, they allow us the authority over our industrial parks, all those kinds of things.
Okay. Councilman Henderson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. If I could add something to that, what Mr. French was asking about, let's remember that we've become accustomed to light traffic on that street. In the 80s and 90s, there was huge amounts of traffic, truck traffic and vehicular, passenger traffic on that street because of the warehousing that was there and bustling. So, we need to remember that in previous decades, that area was heavily trafficked, and it will, with hope, return to that condition, and it was well managed at that point. So I think that a traffic study for local traffic is not necessarily needed.
Okay, any other questions from the public? Okay. I'm turning this back over to you, Mike.
We have another item on the public hearing, which is the annexation request for Michael A. and Robert F. Reed Jr. for annexation of Sussex County tax map parcel number 331-5.15, parcel 6 and parcel 6.01. What's displayed up there on the screen now is the request for annexation that the city received for this parcel. And if I can get to the information that I have here. So this is, and we've included in council's package ordinance number, a draft ordinance that we have, which council will see at the next council meeting, 2021A1. And just to say a little bit about this parcel, it's displayed there. It's on, I believe it's Ross Avenue, sorry. It's 3.201 acres located as outlined there. It's adjacent to existing city limits, so if you wouldn't mind stepping through the couple of the slides. So what's depicted there is a copy of the Sussex County tax map. What's shown in yellow is the two subject parcels, and then the pink is the existing city limits. And as council is aware, it has to be contiguous to existing city limits to be annexed. It is included in our zoning map. The zoning that's requested for this parcel is R3, which is the adjacent zoning, so it would be the spread of a zone. And then it is shown in our comprehensive plan map as part of our annexation area. It's actually what's termed an enclave, so it's an area that we have identified in our comprehensive plan to annex. Just to lay out for council, this is the public hearing where we would look for any comments from the public or the council. And then the next step in our process, it's been through the annexation committee. Council has accepted the annexation report. At the future council meeting coming up, we would introduce the ordinance, which council has, if they choose to adopt, it would be the final step in annexation. So we're here tonight to see if there is any comments from the public related to the proposed annexation.
Okay. First, are there any questions from council? Are there any questions from the public? Okay, seeing none, we'll go ahead and close our public hearing and reopen our regular meeting. I'll turn it back over to our building official, Mike Bailey.
Thank you. So this is for item number 1. The findings of facts is Opportunity Street LLC, preliminary site plan review. The owners are Opportunity Street LLC. Properties location 1700 Delaney Street and 200 Allen Street. Those being tax map and parcel 531-10.00, -45.03, and 48.00. Zoning on both properties is M1 light industrial. They're providing 153 parking spaces on 1700 Delaney and 535 on 200 Allen Street for a total of 688. They're adding a canopy to the existing building on 1700 and connecting that building to the city water and sewer, moving an existing gravel road into the city right-of-way. And the on-site stormwater management improvements on both sites include 2 ponds on 200 Allen Street. Council to make an approval for the construction of the parking lot and pond within the 100-foot safe zone of the well. And the project requires approvals from Sussex Conservation, State Fire Marshal, which they have already, and the city engineer for stormwater. And Planning and Zoning did make a favorable recommendation to council at their last meeting for this.
Okay, I'll accept the motion.
Mr. Mayor, Councilman McCoy, I'll make the motion to approve the request of Opportunity Street LLC for preliminary site plan approval of a parking lot expansion, new parking area, additional utility expansion, lighting, landscaping, and stormwater maintenance in support of the WDE1 project for 1700 Delaney Street, tax map and parcel number 531-12.00.45.03 and 200 Allen Drive, tax map and parcel number 531-12.00-48.00 as presented.
Okay, we have a motion. Do we have a second?
Councilman Holland, Mr. Mayor, I second that motion.
Okay, thank you. Are there any questions on the motion? All right, we'll do a roll call vote. I'll start with Councilman Henderson.
Yes, based on findings of facts.
Councilman Santos.
Yes, based on findings of facts.
Councilman King.
Yes, based on findings of facts.
Councilman McCoy.
Yes, based on findings of facts.
Councilman Holland.
Yes, based on findings of facts.
Okay, it's unanimous. Thank you. Thank you very much. All right, thank you.
Thank you.
All right, we'll move on to new business number 1, and I'm going to invite up
Ms. Newcomer.
Tricia Newcomer to present the sale agreement.
Good evening, Mayor and Council.
Good evening.
Because we've had such an exciting last 2 days, we want to keep that momentum going. So tonight I'm here to present to you the agreement of sale, purchase and sale with KRM Development for the lots 1, 2, 7, and 8 in our Western Sussex Business Campus. To give you, this is a layout of what those lots are. They're allocated in the yellow, orange, whatever you want to call that, 1, 2, 7, and 8. That's what the agreement of sale entails. And just to give you a little bit of background on KRM, they are a full-service developer out of Chestertown, Maryland. That's where they're headquartered. They have facilities in 7 states throughout the country. And by full service, that means that they handle all phases of the development, from the construction phase, leasing, space planning, maintenance. They handle it from beginning to end. So the agreement of sale that you have before you this evening shows that the city will construct all the roads and install all the utilities at the city's expense. And that's being done with the assistance, as you're aware of, in partnership with Sussex County and funding from the state through the bond bill and through TIF funding. Again, it's for the 4 parcels outlined as 1, 2, 7, and 8, and they'll be subdivided by the city and sold to the purchaser. The total amount of acreage for the sale is 44.73 acres of land. The purchase price at $12,000 an acre is $536,760. The purchaser is in agreement to construct a 50,000 square foot building on lots 1, 2, or 7 no later than 18 months after closing on this property, with a completion of 18 months after their construction. And we anticipate closing to be sometime this summer, 2021. There was no broker on this project, so there is no commission fees that need to be paid on this. Phase 2 infrastructure as part of this agreement is to be completed by us by December 31st, 2023. And the buyer will have first right of refusal on the remaining lots. So that's 3, 4, 5, 6, 9, 10, and 11. And in addition, the city is required to grant the purchaser tax credits, 50% of property taxes for the first 2 years, 25% for the next 3, and then after year 5, they shall assume full assessment property of that. And again, the settlement closing is anticipated summer of 2021. And one of the things I want to do highlight, as far as when we did apply for the TIF funding in working with the developer and some of the ratios that they've been able to apply from some of their other business parks, this could mean potentially hundreds, almost 1,000 jobs for Seaford and our area. So this is huge, certainly right on the heels of the announcement from yesterday. This means a great deal to our community, so I'm excited to present that to you this evening.
Thank you, Tricia. Great job. Are there any questions in regards to the sale of this property to KRM? If not, I'll accept the motion.
Councilman Holland, Mr. Mayor, I make the motion to approve the purchase and sale agreement between the City of Seaford and KRM Development Corporation for lots 1, 2, 7, and 8 in the Western Sussex Business Campus, and permit the mayor and the city manager to execute all necessary documents required for the land sale as presented.
Okay, we have a motion. Do we have a second?
I'll second that.
Councilman Santos, second. Are there any questions on the motion? If not, I'll do a roll call vote. Councilman Holland?
Aye.
Councilman McCoy?
Aye.
Councilman King?
Aye.
Councilman Santos?
Aye.
And Councilman Henderson?
Aye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Tricia. I feel like I have a need to thank God for his blessing on our town. We have truly been blessed during a very difficult time with these 2 very huge projects. Not that a lot of people haven't worked very hard on this, but God's moved in a big way, and I just want to feel the need to say that, so thank you. Amen. All right, next we have bids on the utility expansion. Mr. Bennett, early in the agenda tonight.
I checked it twice. I'm used to that. We opened bids on the expansion of the utility building. We received 7 bids. GMB did the review. They were the architect. They confined the review to the 3 low bids. Regional Builders at $458,808.62. Wayland Company at $529,000. Harper and Sons at $548,800. There were 3 alternates that could be deducts. Regional Builders had no deduction for alternate 3. Had NA, so they meant that no cost change. Harper and Sons had an added value of $6,000 for alternate 1. When you add any of those changes in there, it wouldn't reflect the low bid. All the bidders included everything that was required, performance bonds, bid security and all that. So I'd recommend, and GMB recommends, accepting the bid with alternate one deduct. So that would make the bid contract value at $453,904.62 to Regional Builders. There was $600,000 in the budget this year for that, but there's some space in there because we're looking at the weather stripping on the existing overhead doors, some panels that are bad, and the entrance door, 2 entrance doors that are bad. So but it'll still be way under we're waiting on prices to come in on that estimate.
Okay.
So look forward to answering any questions if anybody has any questions.
All right, any questions from council for Mr. Bennett on the building expansion? Councilman Henderson.
Bill, do you have any idea when, if this award is made, when you could occupy the building?
We don't have a timeline on that just because they can't give it to us until the bid is awarded and they get a delivery date on the steel. We asked for either 120, 150 days, and they're gonna try to meet that. But until they place the order for the building and they get a delivery date, that'll determine really when they can get started. They can come in ahead of time, do site work and pour concrete, because it has to sit 30 days before you set the steel. So it'll be kind of depending on the delivery of the steel.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions from council? If not, I'll accept the motion.
Mr. Mayor, I'll make the motion to award the bid for the utility building expansion project to the
Of about $300, so that would make it $9,845.
Okay. Are there any questions on the administration proposal? If not, I'll accept the motion.
Councilman Holland, Mr. Mayor, make the motion to approve the limited construction administration appraisal for GMB for the addition of the City of Seaford utility building project in the amount of $9,845 with funding provided by utility building loan proceeds as presented.
Okay, we have a motion. Do we have a second?
I'll second that motion.
Councilman Santos, second. Are there any questions on the motion? Now I'll do a roll call vote. Councilman Henderson?
Aye.
Councilman Santos?
Aye.
Councilman King?
Aye.
Councilman McCoy?
Aye.
Councilman Holland?
Aye.
Okay, it's unanimous.
Thank
Thanks,
you.
Bill. Appreciate it so much.
Mr. Bennett?
Thank you. All right, next we're calling up our building official again on the tap fee waiver.
So I've sent a memo to Mayor and Council for an expansion of the tap fee waivers for 2021. And what we typically do for each calendar year, the first 21 and 21 would be for a new home in areas of the town where the water and sewer infrastructure is already in and installed by a developer, where we waive the tap fees for new construction on those houses. So we've already hit 21 plus a couple extras this year, but we couldn't give those to them because we ran out before I could get this extension in. So I did include some numbers here. This is the 21 that we've issued. 17 of those are in Muirfield, which D.R. Horton's out there. They're just going like crazy building these houses, and 4 of them are in Governor's Grant, which that developer purchased the last 10 lots, and he's about halfway through those now, so he's got 5 or 6 more to go. So the total for the 21 waivers was $34,450, and we hit the number last year as well, and we got an expansion for an additional 20, which we used up all of those too. And those numbers are shown here, and this is from the start in 2010, what we've done. So I'm requesting an additional 21, try to get it through the rest of the year for these guys.
Okay, are there any questions for Mr. Bailey on the extended tap waiver fee? Councilman King?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. So would it make sense for us to maybe to addend or change it from 21 at maybe at the beginning of the year? So it's not a situation where we're kind of, maybe Mike's not getting back to the developer soon enough, or we're kind of delaying things. Would it make sense to move that number up?
I mean, it's a good point, and certainly council can do that. Mike's done a great job laying out the penetration that we had in this program. And these are the last 2 years. I think it reflects the market that we're under. But yeah, certainly if that's the marching order from council, is that we'll set another number. We can come back in our budget proposal for next year, and we can increase that number to some number greater than just the 21 or 22 in next year's proposal.
Yeah, because Governor's Grant's almost done.
Right.
They've got 5 or 6 lots left, and there won't be any more in there. Muirfields keeps expanding.
Yeah,
They still got a
yeah.
few more phases to go,
Well,
so
Mayersville is a concern.
they'll
I mean,
keep
they could-
asking for
they
'em.
could, They could exhaust 21 very easily.
they have this year.
Yeah,
They've got
exactly.
them.
So, I'm just saying, to take some of those obstacles out of the way, maybe it makes sense just to push that number up bigger at the beginning of the year.
Sure.
Councilman Henderson?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mike, I heard you mention that there were at least 2 houses that couldn't take advantage of the fee waiver.
Yeah, and they're in Muirfield. They submitted these last several, and then I put them in the spreadsheet and saw we were out. So I was actually going to ask for the waiver to be extended retroactive to February 28th, so we can get back to the developer.
So that's 2, or how many is that?
I think it was 2.
Okay. So, yeah, I'm like Councilman King. I think, we're going to soak up all of those and more, because you said there's 10 lots left in.
There's probably 5 or 6 left in Governor's Grant, and I'm not sure their timeline. That they just got a couple permits, and I don't think they've started them yet. And in Muirfield, there's probably the same amount in this phase left before they have to construct the new phase before they run out. But they're running right up on it.
So what is the tap fee waived at the time of the permit?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, we just don't charge them for it at that time when we issue the permits.
So how about if somebody gets a permit and doesn't start construction for, what's the length of a permit, a year?
6 months.
6 months, okay.
Yeah. Now, having said that, Mike can administratively extend a permit.
Right.
So another 6 months, so, and I don't know that you've ever extended one beyond a year, have you?
No,
But-
typically they start by then.
But occasionally, we will have that where he'll go ahead and extend for another 6 months.
But in these areas where these tap fee waivers are good for, it's developers building, and usually they have them sold by the time they get their permit. They're ready to go.
So if I'm looking at the 2020 numbers, there were 40 permits at 71,000, and you've already got 21 permits this year for 34,450. That's actually less dollars than the previous year. Is there a different fee calculation there?
Now, last year we did twice as many. We asked for 20, and I had to come back and ask for 20 more, so we issued
No,
40 waivers.
I see that, but it's 40 for 71,000, but we've already got 21 for 34,450, which is less than half, and we've got one more than 50% of the 2020 number. I'm just trying to make sure that the math is right.
Yeah.
There might be a math error. I
There
see what
could
you're
be a
saying.
math error. Yeah, there could be.
So we're not going to stipulate on the dollar amount. We're going to stipulate on the number of homes.
That's what we've
So
done.
we're going to go to a total of 42.
Yes.
Okay.
In this round. Yeah, and Mike, correct me if I'm wrong, last year we got down to almost the end of the year, October is my memory, and we extended it. Is that?
I can't remember the exact date, but it was further in the year than we are now.
And
And then they used them up too.
Yeah, that was going to be my point, I
Yeah.
guess, that, we contemplated, do we bring it back again? But the year kind of ran out. There were a few people that weren't able to take
I
advantage
think
of it.
I talked to them and they just, I think it was these first two in Governor's
They
Grant.
held
They
off.
waited until January to pull the permit.
We try to communicate with them as best we can.
It matters a lot to the developer,
All right, any other questions? Again, these are incentives to motivate people to build. Right now, we're in a hot market, so I think it's good that it comes through here to realize that we are giving away revenue that would come to the city normally, and we just need to make sure we're keeping, it adds up to be a lot of money over time, so.
It's a great point, Mayor.
Okay, Councilman Nish?
Could I ask one more question?
Yes, sir.
Thank you. I saw in some of your comments that this was by and large used for developments that already had taps
Yeah.
run?
Yes.
Yeah, so like Governor's Grant and Muirfield, Bel Air is a third one. The developer has already installed all the water and sewer taps to each property in there. So the city doesn't have to do any work to them. They've already had that cost burden on them. So in these select areas, council decided in 2010 to offer this waiver
And
as an incentive for the builders to get back in there and
And the
finish
wisdom
them out.
behind that thinking at the time of the councils was, when we go out and have to do our own tap, we have a lot of money expended as far as materials, manpower, patch, all that kind of stuff. All that's been done. So when we looked at the fee schedule, we thought this was something we could work with the developers on that wouldn't be as huge a cost burden to the city.
I get that, but I think it's important for us and the public to understand that this is not necessarily a giveaway because the work has already been done. It's not necessarily a loss of revenue because all that work's already been done. Thank you.
Okay. Any other questions from council? If not, I'll accept a motion.
All right, Mr. Mayor, Councilman King, I will make the motion to approve the recommendation of Mike Bailey, building official, to extend the tap fee waiver program as presented.
Okay, we have a motion. Do we have a second?
Councilman Henderson, I second.
Okay, are there any questions on the motion? If not, we'll do a roll call vote. Councilman King?
Aye.
Councilman McCoy?
Aye.
Councilman Holland?
Aye.
Councilman Henderson?
Aye.
And Councilman Santos?
Aye.
Okay, thank you,
Thank
Mike.
you.
Appreciate it.
Thank you, Mike.
Okay, old business. We have the code change, Chapter
Okay.
8.
Tonight is the second reading of a draft ordinance to amend Chapter 8, Morals and Conduct of the Municipal Code of Seaford, Delaware, sexual offenders, as shown on the following pages. I would like to point out, unless council desires, I'll dispense with rereading the ordinance, but I would like to point out, you'll see there in red, we made some changes to this draft ordinance between the first and second reading. And I'd like to just dive into that a little bit. Council asked staff to follow up on how enclaves of the city or areas directly adjacent to the city would, could people move into those areas? Would the county coordinate with us? So Mayor Genshaw did reach out to the county, and they pointed out to us, and it's in council's package, they stated that there is a state law out there that municipalities cannot adopt ordinances that are more stringent than the state. So we had to go back in and modify the language a little bit under section 8.8.3, restrictions established. And it says now that it shall be unlawful for any sexual offender to reside, lodge, abide, or live within 500 feet of any school and or 2,500 feet of any park or child care facility. So the state subdivides out schools and says 500 feet, and then there is a law that says the municipalities within the state can't do anything more stringent. So in working with the building official, working with the chief of police and the city attorney, they said, okay, fine, we'll revise it to be compliant with the school prohibition. But because the state law does not put a prohibition on parks or child care facilities, those parts of this ordinance could survive. So that's the change that was made between the first and the second reading. Just to little bit about the process. Should council decide to accept these changes and adopt this ordinance, the process would be we would advertise it as required, and then it would be effective 30 days after advertisement, and then we would go forward trying to, or enforcing the ordinance. I will share, should council adopt this, we are going to use our rental license list, and we're going to send a correspondence out to all our landlords, letting them know this new ordinance is in place, and to work with us and work with their tenants, because we have that information, and we feel like we're going to try to get out in front of this, let them know that. And I will share, between the code department, our criminal investigative division, they're going to work real hard to do the best we can to implement this and get our public aware of this.
Okay, are there any questions to the amended Chapter 8? Councilman King?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. The last discussion we had, we talked about some properties in Seaford that were grandfathered in to this ordinance was to pass. The question I have is, if I understood it correctly, if the persons that are there now pack up and move away, at some point that location could dissolve and not have sex offenders residing at that location. My question is, how is that measured? So, like, how do we know who moves out, who moves in, if they move away? Like, how does the city measure that and maintain that?
Okay, so let me say a couple things about that. One, all of these registered sex offenders have to work with the state to say where they are living. They have to give their legal address, and it's required. So that comes through our criminal investigative division, so we know. And that's kind of where we talk about our detectives will need to work with our building official to make sure they comply with the requirements of this ordinance, okay? The state will make sure they comply with the 500 feet, but these 2,500 feet from the parks or the child care facilities is up to us to communicate and then say, nope, they can't live there because, or yes, they can live there because they're beyond the 2,500 feet. So the onus is on us. That's why we really want to get some information out to our landlord group so that we give them the heads up well in advance so that the landlords can work with us, you know, kind of work with their tenant and not kind of get to the last minute here. Mm-hmm. I think what you're going to see as we start to work with this, and this is a new ordinance and this is a new process with staff, you have, and we're going to meet tomorrow internally about how we're going to do this if it gets adopted and gets moved forward. But potentially you might see some additional, at future meetings, additional requirements come through about, and I'm going to use some wrong words here, but we are not going to permit people to hopscotch from location to location, and every 60 days they can just continue to move within the city limits. We're going to be very clear about that and how we're going to enforce that and have ordinance language so that we can prevent that, work with those people. Just an example, Councilman.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
I appreciate it.
Any other questions from Councilman Santos?
Yeah. Thank you, Mayor Genshaw. Charles, is there any change in surface area between the, you know, from the first time that we read this to the second reading? I know that the changes were made with the school. Did that affect the surface area that was covered? What?
Yes, sir. And in your package, you have actually two maps. I'm not sure, you didn't load them up, Michael, so council has them in their map. What Mike put together for us, which is very appreciated, that first map that you see is the 500 feet. And you'll see there, if you take a look at it, large areas of the city, they can live within, you know, they can be within. If you go to that second map, quality's a little different, so you kind of got to focus in there. But what Mike has identified is those other areas of parks and daycare centers. And basically, it covers all but some of the most remote areas in the city. There might be, Mike help me out, a few properties in Governor's Grant right at the corner, potentially. But you can see where those two prohibitions and those two maps make a huge difference.
Okay.
Did that answer your question, Councilman?
I'm not really sure. Because in my map, it looks very similar to the one that was presented the first time, and I can't really tell the difference.
And I don't think there really is a material difference.
Okay.
The original one, it might have changed slightly.
Very slightly around like the Montessori school because it's out on one side
Okay.
Okay,
That answers my question. I had a second question.
sure.
Is there any penalty for landlords if they choose to?
I appreciate you bringing that up. Currently, there is not, okay? Now, what would happen in talking with the chief if they violate this penalty, and what we have to do, we have to get this ordinance into the Delgis system so that we can cite people on this and then arrest them if that becomes necessary. We'll notify them, we'll follow a process, but if they don't vacate or move when they need to, we'll have a legal process we can go through. This ordinance does not currently fine or have any penalties for the landlord themselves. Now, again, as this ordinance becomes effective and we start to work with it and we get advice from our code department, advice from our criminal investigations division, you may see caveats come back like that.
Okay, so the penalty would only apply to the sexual predators, and that would be a fine of $1,000 or less. And
Correct.
person.
The onus
Okay.
is on the person who needs to register with the state and then and now notify the city that that's where they want to live and they have to comply with this ordinance.
Thank you. That answers
Yes,
all
sir.
my questions.
Okay. Any other questions for Councilman King?
Yep. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just a quick question. So if a city resident wants to have an idea where registered sex offenders live throughout our community, where would they go to find that information at?
I believe, and I'm not an expert, Councilman, but I believe there is a website out there, a quick search, and they'll be able to find, that's all registered. Now, remember, all that is are these people that currently, that's in accordance with the state law, not the city law. So that's
Yep.
the best I could tell you.
Quick
where to
search
go.
will pull it up.
It's pretty easy to find.
Okay,
Yep.
thanks.
Public information.
One more
Councilman
question.
Santos?
Yes. Let's say someone lived within the city of Seaford and they were, not a sexual predator, and then they became one. Would they also be grandfathered in, or would they have to move away?
Okay, the way I read this and interpret this, if that happens and they haven't changed their address, I believe they would be grandfathered until they move.
Okay. Thank you.
Councilman Henderson?
Charles, would you touch on the enclaves in the city? I think it was touched on at the last meeting, but I would like it clarified for the council and the public that there are areas inside the city that are not part of the city.
Right.
And would not be subject to this ordinance?
Yes, sir. Councilman, you are correct. There are enclaves or areas of the city that are not annexed with the city around them or very near them. And in our, review with the county, they only acknowledge and have an ordinance around the state law, so 500 feet from a school. So there could be locations in and around the city that look like they belong in the city that are not annexed that this would not apply to, and they could be there legally. That's a good point.
Any other questions from council? If not, I'll accept a motion.
Mr. Mayor, I would like to make a motion to adopt the ordinance to amend Chapter 8, Morals and Conduct of the Municipal Code of Seaford, Delaware, relating to sexual offenders as presented.
Okay, we have a motion. Do we have a second?
Councilman Henderson, I second.
Okay, thank you. Are there any questions on the motion? Now we'll do a roll call vote. Councilman Santos?
Aye.
Councilman Henderson?
Aye.
Councilman Holland?
Aye.
Councilman McCoy?
Aye.
Councilman King?
Aye.
Okay, it's unanimous. Thank you very much. Thank you to our city resident, Mr. Skip. Appreciate your help with this, really. Means a lot. Okay, all right, we're going to go down to committee reports and start again with police and fire with Councilman Henderson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The report is submitted in its entirety, and it's large, so I'll just touch on some high topics. I have a report from Chief John Wilson of the Seaford Volunteer Fire Department. His numbers are effective March 22nd. Fire calls to date for the year is 176 for an average of 2.1 calls per day. We have 43 calls for March, for an average of 1.9 calls for the month so far. On EMS, we have 832 calls to date for an average of 10.2 calls per day, and 194 calls for March for an average of 8.9 calls a day for the month. So that comes to a total of 1,008 calls to date and an average of 12.4 calls per day. Under apparatus, there's a couple of pieces that are, or there's one piece that's out of service. The Rescue 87 is still out of service. Engine 87.5 and Engine 87.2, their DOT checks have been completed. Under training, one key part of the training on March 17th, 20 members attended a Homatro battery tool training session at Station 71 in Blades. Along with them, Station 87 participated in tearing some cars up, and they showed how the battery tools work. The next training will be April 21st, and they've been busy with doing drive-by celebrations out in the district, and the department conducted an in-district fire prevention award presentation to students at Frederick Douglass and West Seaford elementary schools. They were also on the EMS standby for the events at Middle Ford Speedway, and Tower 87 did a flag detail in Federalsburg for the passing of one of their past chiefs. In the Seaford Police Department, Chief Kraft gives his report of the crimes to date in the spreadsheet there. You'll see under criminal that there were 277 complaints for the period, and you'll see the distribution of the violations there. There's an 87% clearance rate overall. Moving on down, pardon me, under drug complaints, there were 22 drug crimes. Mostly, you'll see mostly with adult arrests. Of them were 20 of those were adult arrests. Under traffic, there was 398 traffic contacts, resulting in 123 citations and 36 warnings. There was one DUI, and it was unfortunately accident-related. Moving on down, there's a list of significant events. The chief at our meeting noted that domestic-related crimes and violent crimes are on the uptick, and that may be a seasonal thing based on it's starting to get warmer. COVID is starting to get a little bit down, and people are becoming more active. So he's monitoring that situation. So just be aware that that there is an uptick in those crimes. There was a significant event. I'm trying to find that event. Yes, on the 21st of March, there was a defendant that was involved in the theft from a vehicle, and he fled, and they impounded his car. And he was observed by an officer later that same day breaking into the impound lot to try to recover whatever it was out of the vehicle. And the officer observed him, and he fled. They gave chase, and that resulted in them getting a search warrant for the vehicle in the impound lot, and they recovered 3 guns, 130 packs of heroin, 37.5 grams of marijuana, and $842.92 in U.S. currency. So the gentleman was definitely trying to get some of that back at that time. So he was apprehended. They gave chase and apprehended him, and other charges may be forthcoming in this case. Further on down, you'll see the administrative activities. The chief and his staff maintain a very busy schedule. And under events, the notable event was that the Honor Guard detail conducted funeral proceedings of retired Chief Floyd Toomey, formerly of the Ellendale PD and Dagsboro PD, which included a casket watch, a pallbearing, and a burial detail. And it should be noted that Chief Toomey was one of the longest serving chiefs in Delaware. Upon retiring in 2019, he became a constable for the Indian River School District, and he will be greatly missed by all that knew him. And I think I'll end it right there.
Okay.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much. Next, we'll have Codes, Park and Rec, Councilman Holland.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Start off with code. We're doing routine inspections for ongoing projects, and the site work has started at Wawa's with the possibility of October 2021 for a store opening. And permits has been issued for a 3rd classroom building at Montessori School, and all other work is routine. Now I'll switch over to Parks and Rec, and they're busily doing tree trimming throughout the city. And youth soccer signups ended 3/19 with 68 kids currently signed up. And new COVID-19 plan and forms for all softball tournaments are being put in place. And they're organizing volunteers for upcoming Easter egg hunt, 3/27 at 9 a.m. And they're waiting on an update for Delaware Public Health for plans for 2021 Riverfest. And the local 4-H club has donated 2 picnic tables for the J Nest. And that concludes my report.
Okay, thank you very much. Next, we'll have electric with Councilman McCoy.
Well, thank you, Mr. Mayor. A few highlights from the report, and I believe we got a few visual aids coming your way tonight. So in regards to the crew, recently started cutting down the trees in the industrial park for the buffer fence, which we'll see in a little bit, which, there you go. Right on cue. You see a little bit of tree trimming out there. I can skip to that for a little bit. So I think that we got around 1,000 trees and replacing it with the fencing out there along the industrial park. And you see some of our brightest out there working on it right now. You see the difference already. That's pretty cool. So that'll be going into place here soon. And that bad boy right there is the EV charging station city's purchased. It's a double charger. It'll be placed in the parking lot that the city's purchased over at 405 and 407 High Street. And Charles is going to have you lifting over here. Looks like a Ghostbuster backpack if you ask me. But,
So this will be installed
cool.
across the street,
Yeah.
and people will be able to plug their electric vehicle in the next few months or so. Right, Mr. Bennett?
That's pretty neat. So I look forward to that. Thank you,
So is that
Charles.
portable, or that's gonna be in place all the time?
It'll be placed placed all times on a concrete
Okay.
pad, so you have to pull your car up.
Free,
to it.
free charge or charge?
No, that's a revenue source for the city
Oh,
of Seaford.
nice. Awesome.
That's pretty neat.
Put a generator next to it.
Fire up the gas.
The crew also checked on the conduit at the Parks and Rec office for the crawl space project. Started pulling wire in Bel Air for the multifamily and set the first 2 transformers. In regards to the director, had a director's meeting, council liaison meeting, staff meeting, and had the bid opening for the building expansion, and worked with engineers on the Martin Farms project. Over the next few weeks, the goal will be to continue working in Muirfield 1, Phase 2B, to continue building, continue working in Bel Air multifamily, set the electric vehicles charging station, and pull the wire and set the transformer at the AUI building. That's a few of the highlights. The report's been submitted in its entirety.
Thank you very much. And finally, we have Public Works, wastewater, Councilman King.
All right, thank you, Mr. Mayor. My report has been submitted in its entirety. I'm just going to hit some of the high-value activities that's happening throughout our community. I'm going to start with the Public Works Department. Pulled and repaired multiple lift station pumps, installed quite a few new water services throughout the community. They partner with the code department doing property cleanups. They received bids for the police department paving. They also received bids for the fire department roof drainage. Had another issue with the Harbor House here in Seaford with solids and shells in the line. Hired a new employee that started on 3/8, Mr. Jim Wood. Was really going to help that department. I'll jump over to the wastewater treatment facility and compost. Everything is running smooth with the additional county flow. Plant performance remains good. Compost is for sale by appointment. Some of the projects that are happening over the next 2 weeks: new water services going in on Phillips, install new services to lots on East Popular. They're going to continue to pull and rebuild lift stations at the Retirement Living Center, and continue to replace cleanouts on smoke testing list. Mr. Mayor, that concludes my report.
Okay, thank you very much. I got to say, this has probably been one of the most interesting meetings we've ever had since I've been here. Listen, we really want to thank Brad Gillis and KRM for bringing their projects to Seaford, but I want to thank all of you for your votes to set this up, to make this happen, and I want to thank all of our city employees that have been focused on economic development.
Amen.
Everybody from every department has been focused on growing business, and your work is paying off, so thank you very much. With that, I'll accept a motion to adjourn.
Councilman King, so moved, Mr. Mayor.
Motion, we have a second?
I'll second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? It's unanimous. Good night.